Hello, you lovely lot. Thank you all so much for being here today. It's so lovely to see you. I've already seen people chatting, put in the chat feature that we've got folks in Cape Town, we've got folks in the USA, we've got people in Stuttgart in Germany, we've got Oliver here in Sheffield. If you haven't already, do say hello in the chat feature and where you're watching from. It's always lovely, lovely, lovely to know where you're watching from. Today's guest is the fabulous Jordan Schwarzenberger, someone who not only has a bright present, but in my opinion, genuinely has the opinion to be one of the key voices in the industry for years and years and years to come. Today is a pure Q&A focused on building incredible collaborations. Jordan's someone who's well qualified on this to speak on the topic of collaboration, as the Sidemen started itself as a group of YouTubers collaborating on videos, but they've since gone on to expand into music, merchandise, live events, vodka, fried chicken, hotels, the list goes on. It's absolutely crackers. We might not go for the full hour today. It's just a pure Q&A. So what I'd ask is that you drop in the Q&A feature down below in the taskbar, any questions that you have as we go along, as we focus on collaborations today. Our feature sponsor today is Brand Recruitment, but we'd also like to say a big thank you to Channable Impression, Cambridge Marketing College, Redgate Software, and Storyblock. Brand Recruitment in particular, as they're our featured sponsor, are a lovely, lovely recruitment agency based in Cambridge. They do a fabulous job and they've been with us since day dot, which is just lovely. So introduction done. Let's get going with the questions. So Jordan, mate, you're an absolute
Hello.
thank you.
Mate, not at all, not at all.
And
Mate, anytime.
you're a good man. Let's start with an easy one. Well, maybe an easy one, I don't know. But I want to ask you, what's your favorite collaboration that you've ever been?
Yeah, it's a good question. Just to also preface, I'm in a co-working space in White City. So please, if people are clanging their teacups or anything, that's not me. That's everyone else. And I'm sorry for that in advance. But anyway, we'll make do. So my favorite collaboration, I would say the one that springs to mind of everything, especially in the last 2 years that we've done with the Sidemen, is probably the charity match of last year. So the Sidemen charity match is a returnable annual event that the Sidemen have done since 2016. The aim has always been to raise as much money as they can for charity and to make an amazing spectacle and event for fans of the creative business in the creative space. So, in it, they have 2 teams, and in those teams are the biggest creators in the country. And they have historically done it, in places like Southampton and in Charlton and so on. And last year we did probably the biggest in terms of the production, even though we had Charlton's, bless them, it's not the best stadium in the world, but and it had its problems, as I'm sure anyone watching could see. But it was like 27,000 people in Charlton, and it was an amazing event where we had a huge collaboration between YouTube Shorts, who are our primary sponsor. We had, Calm, Teenage Cancer Trust, Rays of Sunshine as our sort of charities. We had about 3 or 4 production companies working on it. After Party with the lead production company. We had an after party. We had all sorts of stuff going on, and actually to galvanize all of the sponsors, all the brands, and then all the players, everyone from Mr. Beast and someone like a Speed to Cal Freezy, Randolph, like all of the scene really, both here in the US. To have all of those people come together for the day, and it went really well. And I don't know if anyone saw it, but yeah, we raised over £1 million for charity, had like 2.6 million concurrent viewers, so people watching it at one time at its peak, which is bonkers. It made it the 5th biggest stream of the year globally last year, which was incredible, and ended with about 15-20 million views. Huge amount of press, like people were talking about it. It was like flooding everywhere. You couldn't go anywhere without seeing it, which was great, and actually a testament, I think, really to the collaboration, bringing the brands, the charities, and all the players together. And yeah, this year we're excited to go and do it even bigger, which is great. So yeah,
that's just incredible. So we've got Nicole in the chat saying that charity match was amazing with a love heart afterwards, and likewise Nicole's actually dropped in the chat a very pertinent question on this, because I hear you describe everything and like I'm thinking, oh my God, that's a lot of people to bring into one space to do one thing at one time. And so Nicole's actually narrowed in on one specific element here, which is saying, while the Sidemen are all famous, some, such as KSI, have obviously managed to become more successful than others. How would you manage to keep everyone happy and engaged in the long term?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good question, and yeah, I think the main thing is focusing on them as people and actually what they want and what their personal ambitions are, because everyone has different levels of drive, determination, ambition, interest. You know, someone like JJ KSI, like his drive in the areas that he loves, music, boxing specifically, is obviously huge, but the amount of work, time, effort, energy, you know, these things come with a sacrifice. He's willing to make that sacrifice, but obviously it takes its toll, and it is not always easy. As I'm sure, I don't think anyone saw his documentary, which went into his life, but you saw a lot of that. You saw the ups and downs of being so busy and being pulled in all different directions, and it's a battle that he has to deal with on a regular basis. Whereas for a lot of the other boys, you know, they just want to make content. They just want to do Sidemen content and maybe some personal stuff. Some of the others have their own individual channels. Some don't anymore. They just do Sidemen. And because the Sidemen is a franchise and a brand is so established and successful, actually it's enough to just do that. So it all depends on what they want to do. And actually a lot of them now are getting into a stage in their life where what's making them happy is actually, you know, their fiancés, their girlfriends, their babies. Like that's the era of the Sidemen we're in now, which is basically settling down and making the world of content work for their lives. I think that's our job really as management, is to make sure that we are looking after them and supporting wherever they are in their own personal desires, ambitions, etc., rather than trying to push them in any direction that they don't want to go into. And ultimately, the best thing about working with a group of 7 rather than 1 in a lot of ways is that they do a lot of that work. It's a committee, it's a Supreme Court, it's, you know, a full majority, but they do a lot of that decision making. And actually, if something isn't going to work for all of them, they just won't end up doing it. So it makes it so that actually our job's a lot easier, because we're not, you know, we're not in a position where we're trying to move or navigate or strategize for just an individual who can be led by emotions and, you know, moods and whatever else. It's like the 7 of them come to really good decisions together, and that's how they're able to do it for 8 years, really without any management, and now 10 years with us. So yeah.
Nice. That's amazing, man. You know, it's really fabulous to hear that a group that big can actually come together, because that's a lot of voices in the room as well. So I would veer towards thinking that would be a negative, but the fact that you're describing it as a positive is really interesting. Like at the beginning, you sort of said about like trying to understand the individual motivations behind people, and bringing this into a context where folks, you know, don't necessarily have a stable of 7 sort of incredible, you know, influencers, creators, celebrities, whatever you may call them, but into a more business context. I'm just interested on the sort of the process that you do as management of the Sidemen to sort of like get to the nub of like, what are the things that people really want? You know, is it questioning, or is it just literally sitting down in those committee meetings and just listening? I mean, what's your process for finding out what people want if they're trying to build their own collaborations?
Yeah, so I think it's you know, it all depends, right? So whether if we're working with let's say brands, then I think, you know, it's really about how can we bring the 2 powerhouses together, whether it's a, you know, like a Revolut, for example, obviously brand that I can't call, they're not a bank, can't call them a bank, as I learned over 18 months working with them. Get very upset if you call them a bank. An app for all things money. It's basically a bank, Revolut. You know, with them, the challenge was like, how do we, you know, build something that really pushes Revolut's credibility amongst this youth audience, helps to, for us, get credibility for the Sidemen by working with such an established, you know, huge business like Revolut. To bring those 2 forces together, for us, it really you know, it's so important. And actually, like it was sitting down with them and making sure that, you know, we were both getting a good amount of value on either side. I think that's really important. And I think for the boys now, they're at a stage in their career, and we're at a stage of the business where you know, we aren't willing to and they're not willing to do anything that doesn't really push their brand forward, their credibility, their legitimacy, as well as, you know, financially being rewarded. It's not really about money for them anymore, because they're past that point. They own too many things. They have all these different revenue streams. The goal is really about, you know, working with partners in a collaborative way, really from a strategic basis rather than from a commercial basis. I think that's a really nice position to be in. Most creators don't have that luxury, because they are, you know, they're building and they need the money to survive. They're at a different stage. So I think that's where we are with collaboration and working out what people want. It's all about finding value on both sides and making sure that anything we do is strategic rather than purely through a commercial lens. I think we get the best outcome that way.
Nice. I love that. Well, thank you for sharing. And it strikes me that finding that strategy is a really interesting thing, because collaborations in particular feel they rely on like chemistry. You know, as much as anything else, they rely on like people liking people and getting along and sort of coming into these relationships where you know, where people just enjoy working with each other one way or another. So how much of these collaborations for you over the course of time have been down to chemistry, and how much have been down to that strategy that you speak about? Because presumably there's got to be elements of both.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point and absolutely true. I think it depends on the type of relationship. So with Revolut, probably, you know, being honest, you know, there were some challenges maybe or in terms of some of that chemistry, in terms of like, you know, understanding a lot of brands, right? This is the challenge working with brands, why we don't do it that much, because there is a gap between understanding how creators want to work and how they need to work versus what the brand outcome wants. And I think that can cause strain and tension. And I'd be lying if I said there wasn't some of that during that process, because of the size and the scale of it, where I think that's natural. But I think when it comes to business partnerships, you know, a lot of the brands we've launched are IP brand building exercises and projects where we're working with, you know, either franchise partners, for example, with Sides, or we're working with, you know, our JV partner Hero Brands on XX Vodka, whatever it might be. Working with those partners is hugely about chemistry, because you're ending up in a marriage basically with them from a business perspective, where you really need to make sure that you know, the relationship is good, and that from day one you have a vibe with somebody and you actually have that chemistry. Because if you're going to be working with these guys to build something special over 5-10 years, you need to make sure that you are really like each other and you enjoy being in the same room and you're actually catching. Because if you don't now, then you're really going to resent it in, you know, in the weeks and months to come, especially when things get challenging. And our experience with JVs is that, you know, it's not always easy. Like, it's very hard. I think most people will say the same about JVs. They can be very difficult because you are in that marriage, and so when the marriage is difficult, right? It's the same thing. And actually there are ups and downs, of good times, bad times, but ultimately if you really like the person at the end of the day, then you stand a much better chance at making it last long term. Yeah.
Bang on. I don't want to ask you a question that will like make you stray into a place of discomfort, but I can't ask, you know, I can't hear that answer without sort of prying into those times where things have gone wrong one way or another, and like, again, sort of grounding this in business or whatever it may be. So you don't need to give a specific example. What were the principles behind that sort of conflict resolution that were really important at the time of trying to overcome those tension points one way or another?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, like, you know, the biggest challenges are often around value and how much you're giving, how much someone else is giving, perception of value. Other challenges will definitely be around, you know, strategic creative alignment, making sure that there is that. And again, that's really important from day one. And when that hasn't been as firm, it's about establishing where you sit, having really distinct, I think, roles, responsibilities, like making sure that, especially in JVs more than anything, but also in terms of working with brands, that you have a very clear set of you guys do this, we do this, we come together in the middle, but making sure that everyone is respected in those areas. And I think our partner here, for example, have been very good at that, especially on Sides, which is, you know, a business. They are, you know, a huge company in Scotland who are responsible for brands like Madonna Kebab, Island Poke, Chopaluna. They know food exceptionally well. And on Sides, they've been phenomenal at getting franchise partners on board. They, you know, using their expertise from a GDK, fastest growing brand of 2021 in the food space, and bringing that into something like Sides. So they really know, you know, they're on the operational side of the business, the strategic, the business side. We are more on the creative, marketing and consumer facing side, and we come together in the middle, and it works exceptionally well. So I think that's an example where actually you need to have those things in place. And I think the more you know your roles and responsibilities, the better it is for everybody. Again, like I think in any relationship, it's important to know where everyone stands and what everyone does. And yeah, I think in terms of collaboration, especially working with creators and working with 7 of them, if that's not done right, it can definitely cause challenges. And as mentioned, those challenges can range in a number of ways. But yeah, you need to make sure that from day one, if possible, those foundations are good.
Yeah, spot on. And like on a mechanical basis, and so there's 2 questions that come from this. The first is, how long do you typically sort of engage with someone before you go, yep, you know what, we're going to work with you, you know? And then secondly, and it's a very, very boring but important point, you know, do you write all this into contracts? Is that like a really, really important part? You know, we do the marketing and you do the operations, or is that just sort of like implied because you're deciding to sort of go on this adventure together, which could presumably shift and change over the course of time?
Yeah, again, a really good question. I think it's, you know, there's good and bad. There's no right way of doing it. I think we've done both sides of that. We've had contracts which are very, very extensive, which go into, well, you do this, you do this. I think my instinct actually is that's not the way to do it. And where it's been more successful is actually the looser it is, in a way. If you both have that shared vision, you're both making those commitments which are clear and tangible, in terms of whether it's, you know, financial commitment, or whether it's commitment in terms of marketing, whatever it might be. Those are clearly identified. I think as long as you're honest and you have that spirit of, we're building something together, we're really partners, then, you know, the minute, I think actually you get into the minutiae of, well, you do this tiny bit here and this bit here and and actually, have you not done this bit in the contract in line 54 clause 6 actually this week? Then again, the relationship kind of doesn't collapse, but it can be really strained, because you go, well, actually, you didn't do this thing in line 63 of clause 12 or verse 3, whatever it might be. And then you kind of go back and forth. And I think you want to avoid that as far as you possibly can. And where we've had a lot of success in our collaborations have been, almost the looser they are, but the more, I guess, committed in terms of energy, determination, passion they are to begin with, the more there's an alignment in that vision. And there's obviously some clarity and some tangibles, the better it is for everybody. But you want to be almost going into it as a partnership rather than in a transactional way. I think that's maybe the difference, I think.
Nice. I love that. I mean, it's something that actually feels very relevant. So we often speak about our sponsors at the marketing meetup, and, you know, we describe them as sponsors and partners interchangeably. The experiences where we've had the best experiences are where, you know, with our current group of sponsors, where they've bought into the vision of a community which comes together based around positivity and kindness, you know, and they're on the journey, and they know that the value is in the values. And so they decide to sort of go on that journey with us one way or another. And therefore we can come to them with silly ideas over the course of time, and they go, yeah, you know, that seems really sensible, or the other way around.
100%. Just to add to that as well, I think, so I was just going to add to that. Yeah. I think when you're, especially when you're working with creators, like collaborating based on the, you know, the creator, their vision, their mission, their values, their personality, but actually if that's the engagement rather than, well, how many people can you hit? I think, again, that's a much better way of doing it. I think so much in the influencer marketing world, of course, is about numbers and data and metrics, etc. But actually, you can get, I think, a lot of the surprise hits are actually where it's more about the softer, intangible qualities of a creator working with a brand that can actually move brands more and actually do better for brands than just focusing on numbers. I think actually when you focus too much on, you know, well, almost treating talent as if they're media inventory too heavily, I think, of course, is a part of that. But working with agencies through the years, so much of the conversation is around the media inventory. And I know that's how a lot of people in agencies are KPI'd and benchmarked, but it's a really sterile way of working. And actually, when you're working with talent and creators, there's so much intangible gold there if you actually just go slightly left field in your approach. And I think for us, the best collaborations we've done are the ones where brands really understand that. YouTube, I think, were a really good example of that, working with us on the charity match, where, you know, the way they work with us, their demands, there were some elements of media, of course, but actually the vast majority of their support was actually just, look, make this happen, make it amazing. We believe in you, we believe in the vision, go for it, rather than we need to make every single bit of our focus about how many Instagram stories and tweets and posts and how much reach have we got and what's the CPM. It kills, I think, the kind of creativity and the soul of it, really. Yeah.
Hang on. No, you know, I love that you use the example of creators, and because I think that creativity, you know, element is so important. It strikes me that if you are, you know, a B2B accounting firm, you know, the principle still applies, you know, you know, you need to be on board with a vision one way or another, because I think what you spoke to as well was like not counting score, you know, in the same way as you don't count score in a great marriage or whatever. It's just like, you know, if you're on the same page, you know, we know what we are and we know what we're looking to achieve. It feels like a far better place to come from, which is bang on. We'll take a step back, because I went into contracting, and I didn't even ask the question about which Haley has asked in the Q&A, which is, how do you approach someone you want to collaborate with for the first time? Or we'll do it both ways, in the sense that how do you filter those collaborations that sort of come inbound and decide whether or not to take them?
Yeah, so I think for us it begins with, you know, is there alignment in terms of vision and in terms of what we're trying to both achieve, right? So I love personally, like, working with brands, I think it's not a tricky one, but slightly, because we don't do much of it at all, right? The boys don't work with brands really ever. Now it's very, very few and far between. But let's say we found a brand, there are conversations, there are people out there who I look at and I go, I would love to do something with them. That would be amazing, because it would make people sit up, which is probably the most important thing for me actually, is doing something where, you know, where you're joining forces with another entity where the audience and seeing it go, wow, like that, I wasn't expecting that. Like Revolut, I think Revolut's a good example of us doing that pretty well, where people probably weren't expecting that joining of forces, but because we did it and because it was at scale, it makes everyone go, wow, there's something really different in left field about that partnership, which people respond well to, and that's why it did well for them. So I think that's a big part of it, is actually just finding alignments which are unexpected, but also have a thread and a shared value system, which is interesting and ultimately makes us go, yeah, this is cool to work on. This is different. There's no point doing anything. You know, they can do as many, you know, traditional YouTuber deals as they like. They're not going to move the needle for anybody. The brand may be short-term financially, but it's not going to go anywhere long-term really. And for the creator, for the Sidemen, it won't do anything for them strategically. So it's finding those stories and bringing it, and the kind of coming together from a narrative perspective, value perspective, that just makes you go, yeah, this is cool, this is different. And then in terms of filtering, I think, yeah, for us now, it's very much about, is it meaningful enough financially? Because most brands these days want more and more for less and less, and don't really want to invest properly into content and into creators. In a way, it's more a spread betting exercise amongst the sort of micro influencers more and more. I think like the bigger creators, the economy of content creation has changed dramatically with TikTok and everything else, where actually, what is the value of having 1 million followers if you can get 1 million followers on TikTok within a few months? Like, and that is what people are doing. When you've got so many creators who have reach, like what's the real differentiating factor in terms of money? And when brands are looking at working with creators, primarily due primarily through the lens of numbers and return on investment, of course, that's obviously that would make sense. Because there's so many out there now, it's just the prices come way down. So how many brands can really how many brands can really come to the table for the Sidemen, for example, with an offer that's meaningful enough for all 7 of them to get behind and really back and be invested and be, you know, excited about it in a way that isn't, you know, traditional in this country, which is relatively small. And I think that's few and far between anyway. So that cuts a lot of people out. And then I think it's about creative alignment. Do they trust the boys to deliver something great? Are they going to try and prescribe every element, word, detail to such a degree that you end up killing the soul of the integration or the partnership, and make it so that the audience can read through it and see that it's fake? Like, do they get that? And also, do they buy into the Sidemen? Do they buy into the vision? Do they want to be a part of it? And do the boys love it? I think that's always the best way, is when there's genuine affinity and love from the creator to the brand, or from the talent to the brand. That way you get the affinity, and when you've got that, it sells itself, rather than you being, well, I'm holding up this can because they paid me a lot of money. That's really, I think, you know, meaningless, but also people see through it, and it kind of is soulless for the creator to even do. So I think, yeah, when you're at the level of the Sidemen now, they're really selective, and I think a lot more and more creators at that top end, when they start breaking into IP and having more revenue streams and long-term income, will just get more and more selective, and actually won't want to just do those transactional deals. The transactional days, I think, are kind of going a little bit from both sides of the camp. Brands not have enough money to really work with the people at the top, but also creators going, I don't need this really, and it's not authentic to me or my audience, so why would I bother?
I love that. Thank you. And I think it speaks, you know, exactly to your point. You know, I just wanted to reiterate rather than add new information, but that sort of creativity, that authenticity, that needs to come through on all of these things, whether it's a creator brand partnership or a business partnership. You know, if it feels weird, then it's probably weird. You know, and people will respond accordingly. You know, everyone realizes how these things work one way or another. So genuinely, it feels important. So there's 2 questions that are sort of top in the Q&A. One is my fault, but then the second is interesting. So the first one, which is my fault, is, what is your actual job? It wasn't clear from the intro, so like there's that bit, and then the second question.
Yeah, so it's good and important. So I'm the co-founder of Arcade Media, myself, Arcade Media, which is the management for the Sidemen. So we manage the Sidemen. All 3 of us are their managers. We just do it as a 3 rather than individually. We manage them. So what that means, for those who don't know about talent management per se, is around how do we build their brands, build their business. We are, you know, trying to take them from A to B, strategically, creatively, and commercially, and help them to ultimately realize the ambitions that they've always had, and to help them to relieve the stresses and time commitment of, you know, being all in invested in things day to day, by taking a lot of that pressure off them. So what we're also doing, a big part of how we're different really, is that we're only with the Sidemen, that we don't manage other clients, which is a bit scary if they're not as big as the Sidemen, but if they're as big as the Sidemen, I think it's scarier to manage other clients because you get distracted on the opportunity with them, which is so big. And our whole aim is to basically automate their life, automate their world as fast as we can on the corporate side, the commercial side, bring in corporate structures, hire great people, increase the quality of their team, and build them IP and brands that can outlive them. And make their just life generally easier so they can make better content and focus on what they're good at and what they're best at, which is the content creation. So that's kind of what we do in a nutshell.
I love that. And the last bit there, the last sentence I think was wonderful, and that you sort of said, we allow them to do what they do best. And I think that speaks to the core of so many great collaborations as well, right? That say with the marketing meetup, we collaborate with other brands when they're doing something that we can't, one way or another, and having that core competence and sort of realizing what you're good at and what you need someone else to do, I think is the opportunity for brands out there to just identify, okay, these are the collaborations that we want. In a way, Arcade is collaborating with Sidemen to sort of produce, something which is better. It's a wonderful example of it in action. There's a follow-up question here from Azim, which is about you personally, which is, how have you developed your negotiation skills as a result of your role? Some relationships, lots of back and forth until agreements are reached. What advice you got?
That's a really good question. Work with accountants and people who are much better than myself. That's the way. So I have two co-founders, Aaron and Sam, both of whom are accountants, and in terms of their trade, they really are good at contracts, looking at the business side of things. I am, I'd say, average at negotiating because I feel like maybe I've gotten a bit better at it over time, but my instinct is to be a bit too nice. It's like, yeah, whatever. I don't overly dig into the detail. I'm not the best at contracts because I don't care about 95% of contracts. I'm just like, let's get on with it. So I drastically need somebody like an Aaron, somebody like a Sam, who get into the detail, and they love the detail. I don't enjoy the detail. I'm just more like, look up, big picture, let's go for it. Whereas they're more prudent, and especially Aaron, when it comes to contracts, he sort of leads on the commercial side. Sam more on the finance side, so he can really dig into the detail. And he's a very analytical person, so he can, and probably sometimes he'll say this, like, too analytical in some ways, right? But he can get so into it to the point where he can make sure that everything's covered. So if I have any contract or anything that I'm working on, we'll have agreed terms, headline things, I'll send it, Aaron, you can take it on, and he just does it. So I would say a good thing to do is bring people around you who, if you're not naturally good at it, to do it and learn from them, but make sure that you're not trying to do everything and be like, and pretend that you're good at it if you're not, because it's not my area where I'm like, this is where I absolutely excel, and I don't really want to. So hand it over to people who can. It's a good, maybe, I don't know if that's good advice or not, but it works for me.
No, I think that speaks to an idea of self-awareness though, right? And so I think we can apply this in two contexts. The first is self-awareness of you and your skills and where you're good and where you're bad. But we can also apply this in the business context when we're speaking about collaborations. This is where my business is good, this is where my business is bad. And so, like, I'd be interested in either the work you've done on yourself or the work that you've done in your business with your co-founders to sort of identify where your weaknesses lie and where you need to bring people in. So what, are you a self-reflective person, or, do you do
yes,
that?
I mean, yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, I think, yeah, like I feel like it's a bit it's not like humble to say you're humble, or not humble to say you're self-aware, really. But at the same time, I know I'm definitely not self-aware most of the time. However, I try and be more reflective in terms of, I know I'm really bad at this, or I know I'm okay at this, or I know I'm better at this, and therefore, we always try. And that's why I think, like, working is, I can never start a business on my own again. I did it once when I was 19, and I'm not doing it again. It was okay, but really and truly, like, having a co-founder is like the best thing in the world, and I'm so grateful every day for the fact that I have the two of them, because doing it on your own is so lonely, and it's really difficult, right? As anyone who started a business knows, it's so hard to not have the sounding board. You have to do all things. Whereas for us, I think we're very fortunate, and it's a massive blessing to have three of us who all have different skill sets. Like, Sam and Aaron overlap much more. They're both accountants, and they're both very good at that. That's what they did exceptionally well. Aaron's probably more creatively commercial. Sam is more entrepreneurial, finance driven. So, and I'm creative and strategic, really. So we balance each other out really nicely. We all have our roles. It's always saying about collaboration. It's the heart of what we're trying to talk about. We all have our roles. We all know where we stand, what we lean on. So much so that we've had 2 years without any issues between us. at all. There's no conflict really ever, maybe tiny things, but nothing substantial. And there's never been really a moment where it hasn't flowed really well. So once that structure's in place, there's no egos overlapping. There's no, well, I do this, you do this. You know, if everyone knows where they stand, and especially in a co-founder collaboration, then I think it flows so well. And we've had, you know, I think immense amount of just operational success because we've been able to know where we stand. Like Sam does the invoices, he does the money, Aaron does the brands and the commercials, and I do the creative and the strategy. It's like that's kind of every part of the flow. And then yeah, it's knowing. I think all of us know where we aren't as good, and I think we're all very comfortable in that. Like none of us want to be the big star, want to be the one who is doing it all or taking on more. Like I think we've all had to keep each other nicely in check, but also just be aware and drop our egos. There was something actually Neil Rodford, who's the CEO of YMU before Mary, who's now the CEO there. And he always used to say, like, you know, he had like egoless, and like removing the ego is one of the most important parts of YMU, and it was one of the most important parts of that business. And I think it's the same with any good business. It's actually leaving that at the door. The Sidemen are a good example of that too. I always think actually how there's so many opportunities for egos to flare. And yes, they have their moments. Of course, we're all human, we all do. But generally speaking, they're very self-aware to just put their emotions at the door, put their ego at the door, and work collaboratively for the betterment of the group. And I think we try and do that as well at Arcade. And I think so far it's been great actually. And that part of it, the ability for us to get on well, to enjoy working with each other, to not really have any problems, but also to be honest and frank and hold each other to account, I think is a testament to knowing our weaknesses, knowing our flaws, and knowing our place. And I think that bit of knowing our place has been one of the fundamental elements to why we've been able to do what we've done in quite a short space of time.
Right. How can we go after that answer? That's bang on. I mean, we got Chantel in the chat here saying, I'm so impressed with Jordan. I have such imposter syndrome right now, which I'm sure wasn't what you mean.
Oh, bless you, thank you.
And we got Amber saying delegation and self-awareness are such great skills. I love that answer, as no one can be the best at everything. Thank you, mate. That was really wonderfully stated, and I think so important. And if I was to draw out a couple of principles there, because I think it's really important what you said about ego, because quite a few of the questions that are coming through are like about power imbalance, you know, one way or another. Like if someone is more powerful or implied to be more valuable, how one can navigate that. And at the very least there, I think you spoke to knowing what your value is and leaving your egos at the door, one way or another. You know, those two things feel really important. And the third, which we've already covered, is sort of having that shared vision or idea of where we're going. I think all three of those things feel super important. My co-founder is now in the chat saying he's better than me. So there we go. That's why we're completely dysfunctional. But I'm interested beyond those 3 points. So the shared vision, the leaving the ego at the door, and having clear sort of tasks or a part in the role. Is there anything, just so we can close the door on power dynamics, is there any last bits of advice that you could sort of share if there is sort of like an imbalance of power one way or another?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that we've experienced right over the last year is since we all came together actually. I'm in White City, so house now, but it was in the Strand one, and we all sat down at the table around the table and sort of said, this is when sort of a lot of the LinkedIn I guess the LinkedIn content, personal branding stuff was really moving. And we've been watching for a few years about how important that is. And I didn't actually do it when I was at YMU because we kind of had a sort of unspoken rule, but somewhat of a rule, which was we didn't want to do it. We didn't want to get in front of our clients too much, which I completely get to a point. But actually, in the way that social, especially business social on LinkedIn, has just catapulted, I think companies that do that miss a huge opportunity. There's the expectation that speaking. I always believed at YMU, and I still believe now, if you can't market yourself, how can you market anybody else? And that's ultimately your job as somebody who's representing, to be a version of that person in the corporate world and to represent them. And you can't do that by being silent. It's just my belief. So we all got together after we'd sort of been grinding away, on our brands and everything before they launched, actually, I think, or maybe they just launched. And we sat down and agreed actually that we wanted to take LinkedIn more seriously, take personal branding more seriously. And we all kind of got around and agreed that, I'd be happy to do that. I had the biggest platform at the time, maybe like 2 or 3K or something on there. And I was willing to put myself out there and be that sort of ambassador for us. And, that over a year now or so, obviously it's grown quite nicely and been building and so on. But that obviously adds a whole another set of challenges into the mix, because then you've got someone who's like the visible face of a co-founder relationship. And how do you navigate that? And that's something that we've had to really work out in a really positive way. But I'd be lying if I said that emotionally that has always been easy, because if you've got someone out there who is visibly the head of something, that requires everybody in your co-founding relationship to, even though you might agree with it, the emotional reality of that can be a bit different. So when you're talking about, when somebody is recognized as the person who is doing the thing, and I have to always be back and go, no, yeah, but we're part of this team, and this is I'm one of. But people are very simple, and people look at somebody and they see something immediately, and that's what they assume it all is, right? They don't dig into these things. So I think that's definitely something which has come with a huge amount of learnings, good and bad, around how do you balance the emotional reality of, having, I'm not going to say like a star, but having somebody in your team that you've designated as your ambassador, your flag bearer, your figurehead, and how do you emotionally get behind that? And I think the key really is that before that starts, you have to emotionally get behind that, and that's a real ego challenge for everybody, but especially for those who aren't that person, to learn how to be comfortable being optically behind and being optically, further down the pecking order. Does that matter to you? To some people, they're like, I'm very comfortable being equally as important in reality, but perception, in terms of perception, not known. Others might say, yeah, but I kind of want my moment in the sun. And actually, I think it's really important, and this is what Aaron and Sam be brilliant at, is them both being very comfortable with that reality that, I'm comfortable putting myself out there and being that. That comes with good and bad. Like, you then have to be the first to, make statements. You have to be the first to, be, you have to, for good and for better, for worse, you have to be that guy. But at the same time, that also comes with more opportunity, more profile, more things that I can be doing personally. And my whole aim with all of it, but on a personal level, is to always do it for the betterment of the site, for Arcade and the Sidemen always, rather than myself. I have no interest personally in being known, being famous, being in any way a profile, other than being able to use a platform and build a platform to draw attention to the work that we're doing, to the great people in the team, to the amazing stuff that the Sidemen have done over the last 10 years now, and of course to Arcade. So yeah, that's just an interesting, I guess, scenario that's played out for us over the last sort of year, which I think for a lot of people is so important, because I think personal branding is so key. And actually, if you're not comfortable putting yourself out there, give it to your co-founder. If you're lucky enough to have co-founders around you, give it to somebody who is. But I think it's better to do that and to navigate and get through it, rather than to waste the opportunity of not doing anything, because you all want to be equally quiet, and so no one then is able to be that flag bearer. I think nowadays more than ever, personal branding, everyone is a content creator, everyone has a personal brand, whether we like it or not. It's just about how much we lean into it and we take advantage of it. But that is who we are these days. So it's important, I think, more than ever, the businesses make the most of that, and we remove our egos to allow people who are naturally ready and up for it to really go and do their thing. Otherwise, I think you all lose, actually.
It's so important. You spoke to communication there. As you said your words, the thing that struck me was that, like, the way that you speak is always like, this is for someone else, one way or another. This is for us, or this is for the people we're representing. But whatever it is, one way or another, we all win if one part of us win. And I think, sort of that ego play it is so important. And like, whether it's personal branding or indeed, a collaboration between, two slightly more mundane sort of companies, I think in either case, if there's a broad agreement in principle that, yeah, what, we all win together, then like that feels really, really important. Let's go a little bit more tactical, because I'm aware that we said we won't go for the full hour necessarily, and there's still 13 open questions from the community, so I want to make sure that we pick those up from everyone. So the next one comes from Amber, which is a tactical thing about building successful collaborations right from the beginning. And I love this because, in particular, Amber picks up on the beginning stages. So Amber says, what do you think are the most important steps to building a successful collaboration campaign? Do you have any top tips for both getting started and maintaining momentum? And is that bit that feels particularly interesting, that starting and getting momentum?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. I think, so I think obviously it would depend on what the type of campaign it is, of course, whether it's, you're entering a business together, like you're building a brand, or if you are, working with someone as a brand, let's just say, I guess, a brand partnership for now, because that's probably the most applicable for most people, rather than starting your own thing. I think how do you start something well? I think it's about really nailing the narrative as to why, like why are you working together? So for us, everything is about storytelling and narrative, whether it's us launching the charity match, whether it's us, we recently changed sets inside Plus and completely redid, added more formats and changed that up. So what's the story? What's the thread? Because I think now people like to be taken on a journey. And if things feel like they are in isolation, I think a lot of campaigns you see, it's like, well, yeah, but why? Like, why is this talent working with this brand? And often it doesn't really make sense. Why is this brand working with this other brand? And it can feel a bit disjointed. And I think actually having a story, having narrative, having a sense of grandeur around it in some way, like making it feel special, will then make it more valuable to the audience. So we found that the more we hype something up and we give time to the rollout, the teasers, the build up, having like a launch asset that's super strong, that sets the tone, like putting money into that, I think is actually one of the most important things you can do. Like having, a proper banging trailer ad. Like one of the good example for us actually is our side cards, trading cards with Tops. And if anyone saw this, but it was very much in the kind of community in a way, but it was the trading cards, Tops's first ever trading cards collection with creators that we did last year. And it went down really well. We crashed like Tops's site, like it just, they weren't ready for the traffic they had, as no one seems to be when we do. So we always tell them, it's like, up your bandwidth, get ready. And they're like, no, it'll be fine. Then it always crashes every single time. So it become a meme now. But like we crashed up this site, like sold incredibly well. And there's a market of those still going and building. But the way we launched that and the whole build up to that was really thought through. It was the most important thing. Like, how do we get to the point where, like, and somebody said it yesterday in the competition I was having, where you've sold it out before you've even dropped it. That's the aim. And I think to do that, you need a runway. People are lazy generally, and people don't care about what you're doing. So you have to really make it worth their while. And for example, if you're like with Tops, it was building up a whole runway of moments, activations, beats, things that were coming and happening up until the point where it launched. Where I think we did like every day, we do normally like a 2-week runway, and every day in the 2 weeks we drop a new thing, or I think in the first week we drop a new thing. So it might be, okay, this redemption, this redemption, this redemption. Then we have the second week, which is like a real then build up of hype anticipation, getting everyone ready. And we're always coming back to the date from the first drop. It's like, when's this dropping? Next Sunday, 8 p.m. Let's just say it's normal to, or next Sunday 4 p.m. is the time we often drop stuff. So it might be Sunday 4 p.m. and we'll be pumping that date, making sure that no one forgets that it's next Sunday at 4 p.m. that it drops. Like, you are not wasting away. Even though you're the Sidemen, even though you have a huge platform, the worst you can do is take that for granted. And if you have a small platform, never take it for granted. Whatever you have, like, make people so almost, not annoyed is the wrong word, because you want to make it always entertaining and fun, but pound it in their faces to the point where you cannot forget that it is next Sunday at 4 p.m. Because if you remember that it's next Sunday at 4 p.m. and the content is great, which is the key thing for us as well, making sure everything's entertaining, it's fun, it's exciting, you're bringing people on like a story, a journey, a narrative, then by the time it gets there, you've got them. And like, we had, a huge amount of people on the site, obviously, huge sign up. That's another thing that I would also recommend for campaigns. Something that we do every time is we have like a sign up list, like a website sign up list. Every time on day one, we drive traffic to that website sign up list. We collect as many emails as we can from that, driving over to that point, and then we see already the interest, but also we have people there ready to go from day one. And then you're bringing those people on a journey as well. Those are the ones who've already shown their interest. So you've got 2 weeks of serving them emails, giving them great content, bringing them on their journey. And then again, when you get to Sunday 4 p.m., everyone knows it, they're there, they're ready, and you sold it out. And that's, like, honestly, it's the best way of doing it, is just really pumping for a longer period of time. I think people really don't do that often. It's like, oh, we're dropping this thing tomorrow, and then it's out, and oh, it didn't sell out. Or, and actually, why should people, how many people are there watching that first announcement? Are people probably busy? And again, they don't overly care. So you have to make them want to care. And that's also about showing that you're giving a lot of resource and time and energy and creativity to actually making it worth their time. And people respect that, I think, is definitely our learning. Yeah.
No, I love that. We've got Oliver in the chat saying that's a really great point. Love that runway, so there's enough room to get the message through. It's bang on, it's marketing 101 in a way, but so few of us actually do it. It's so silly, because we get excited. We're like, yep, I've done this thing, I want to get out, and then so often things will land with a thud rather than sort of flying off. So thank you for sharing that. We had Claire in the chat as well saying, I was a mum crashing their site on the Tops example. So
amazing.
I love that.
Well done, Claire. Thank you.
We got a question which loops into your answer there, because you mentioned the narrative in particular. And Paul in the question says, what's your process or favorite way to generate ideas for collaborative partnerships? So, finding that narrative or creativity on a more ongoing basis.
So yeah, I think that's a good point. I think you know what? I think now for us, right, our collaboration, and I'll move away from brands. We sort of talked about that. Oh, we don't really work, as I said, we don't work with brands really for a number of reasons. Typically it's more, as I say, more problems than it's worth. Often budgets aren't ever very good. Really in the UK, you can if you can branch into the US. Sorry if there's there's probably lots of brands here, but yeah, it is what it is in this country. It's just all very it's all just small. It's a small country. It's a small market, smaller than maybe I think we realize. Actually, when you go to the States, you see what they do. It's like night and day. Anyway, I digress. I think most of our collaborations these days are working with great executives, people, talent who can come in and build a strand of our business or really launch something or take us on another pathway, right? So, I can't speak about stuff that we've got coming up, but for example, in a thing that we will be looking to launch quite soon, it's a very different thing, but we found an individual who is exceptional at what he does, very culturally plugged in, but also just from an experience perspective, perfect for the sector. It'll make sense when it all comes out. But that sort of person, it's actually like having the network that allows you to access great talent and great people, because in reality, like a company is just a collection of people. And if you don't have amazing people, then you have nothing there. And I think our collaboration more than ever is actually about finding amazing executives and people who can come in and really lead these businesses and these strands, both creatively, commercially, operationally, strategically. And I think that's now, like, that's for me the biggest thing. So it's so important. Therefore, it's why the personal branding stuff is so important. Being present, having that presence online, going to events, being in and around it, being visible, and actually having awareness around who you are is so important, because it creates a gravitational pull for brilliant talent, and then you can collaborate on brands, ideas, and projects in a way that I think I really couldn't do before. For example, with LinkedIn, having that little platform there, it's been amazing just to have that, have the ability to connect with so many great people, and for people to come to me with ideas and actually be like, oh, I want to work with you, can we chat, etc. And people to know what's going on. So you meet random people, or people you'll end up having emails being like, oh, I've been following what you've been doing, can we get a coffee? And actually that might spill into something, and then a collaboration comes from it. So I think now more than ever, being present is so important, having a network and just being out there, because that's ultimately how you get the most amount of collaboration taking place, is just by, and it's old school stuff, new or revolutionary, but just by being present. I think it's now more important than ever, especially with working from home, people living in different parts of the country, like trying to have that presence. It's gold, I think now. And increasingly is shown to me the power of personal branding, the power of networking in a way that I wasn't really expecting before.
Nice. I appreciate that, and I think so. If I understood the answer correctly, then it's you find your creativity through great people. Great people create great opportunities. Interesting things happen.
Exactly what you said. I should have just said that. That's exactly it. Could have saved about 3 minutes and moved on to the next question.
It's good. I love the energy though, because I think this speaks to both experience. You're just like, yep, we've got all these different directions that we can take it. Let's take this last question from Ali, because I saw that Ali was in the chat as well, appreciating your work with the Sidemen as well. So I think it's only right that we give it to them. So Ali asks, when did you know that the Sidemen were the right creators for you to invest all your resource and time into? Just to finish off.
Yeah, thank you for that, Ali. I think, I mean, I think they are the one. This is the thing. We went around the houses on this around, would it be worthwhile working with other creators, other talent, other people? Do we want to build a management company? We kept coming back to the reality that there's no one there. There's no one in the UK, really, maybe a handful of people who can actually do anything meaningful from a creative perspective at true scale. And it's not to demean what anyone does or any creators out there, because there's some exceptional talent, but just the scale of it is so much smaller. And when we kept coming back to it, you realize the Sidemen are kind of the only ones who can do it at that level. Obviously, you've got people like Beta Squad now who are coming through and doing incredible work and building out their infrastructure and their content. Obviously, they're sort of further behind in their journey. They've only started recently. You saw this, I don't know if anyone saw the scenes in Australia, but they got absolutely mobbed. It became national news, incredible. And there are other creators, people like a Molly May, etc., people who've done big things, but you go, really, like, how many people can truly operate globally, have a global audience, have self-publishing to, followers over 244 million followers across everything, 18.4 whatever on their main channel. How many people have a 10 million viewer audience every week for their Sidemen Sunday content, and that's consistent? How many people have that subscriber base and whatever on Side Plus? How many people have that relationship and that depth? And the answer really is no one. And there's no one who has that. But really, I found maybe they're out there. I'm just not looking in the right places. Very possible. But I think we kept coming back to it and actually realized, both through knowing them and obviously growing up with them and knowing just how culturally, I truly believe they are the biggest cultural export of this generation. I don't think there is anything bigger for anyone under really the age of 30. I'd say in the UK there is nothing bigger than the Sidemen. And One Direction was the equivalent for the last generation, I would say, really. But for this generation, it is the Sidemen. They have defined a generation in terms of online culture. They have been running the game of YouTube for 10 years. So I think for us, it was a no-brainer when the opportunity came to speak to them, because there's no one bigger. There's nothing quite of that scale. And so for us to then say, right, who else could you build brands with? Like a Sides. Even if you did the exercise, how many people could launch a Sides into 3 countries or however many? How many people could launch a vodka brand and launch a membership club? And when you really whittle down that list, it's very few. So yeah, it was quite obvious to us once we did the exercise that it was worth putting everything in. And yeah, very glad we did. It's meant a lot more creative focus, so much more fun. I'm liberated through my boundaries of working with the one talent, with the one client, rather than being in a management company that's trying to spread and grow for itself. And that's the thing as well. It's a false economy. Grow the talent, it's my talent agency background. Grow the brand of the creator and grow their commercial, strategic and creative world, and you benefit commercially off the back of that, rather than trying to grow for yourself. I think that's the bit. Management companies today, there's all about how do we scale our roster and build this and have loads of teams and whatever else. It's a false economy. When they're this big, build for them and the rest will follow.
Hang on, mate. And isn't that just the most Jordan answer in the world? Because it spoke to giving, So, mate, I appreciate that, and thank you. We've got Natalia in the chat saying, "Thank you, Jordan. Love your way of thinking big, single-minded focus, and putting people around you and your clients first, which is a lovely way to finish the session. Mate, I think you've spoken to so many of the broad and the narrow principles of building great partnerships and collaborations. I hope people have been able to take them from this so exciting context and apply it in your own worlds. I mean, I certainly can. I can feel inspired for the marketing meetup, so it's really appreciated. With all that said, thank you everyone today for your questions, your contributions, your chat comments. Is always blooming appreciated. We'll be back next Tuesday with a session around uncertainty and how to manage that. But in the meantime, Jordan, thank you for taking the time. Thank you for being here, everyone. And we'll see.
Thank you so much, guys. Really, really appreciate it.
No worries. Take care.